Hey, welcome to FEP Labs Radio. My name is Jim, KN4YCD. Today I want to talk about DMR code plugs. They get a lot of bad PR. People make DMR sound like it's so complicated, and it's really not. Each DMR feature is a block that builds on the feature before it, and if you know the order of steps that you need to do, building a DR code plug is a snap. It's really not hard. So let's jump in and take a look. I have a short slideshow for us, and then we're going to walk through some CPS software for a particular radio I have. Thanks. All right, I want to talk about code plugs today. I don't want this to be a real long video. We're going to try and get through the meat of the code plug, and it really boils down to 4 steps. There's a little bit of background information, and then we're going to jump in some CPS and take a look at it, and hopefully you'll come away with this with a better understanding of how code plugs work. So let's jump right to it. The code plugs work on a building blocks, what I call it. So in a code plug, it's a configuration file. CPS is software for creating and modifying code plugs. Configuration programming software, something like that is probably what it stands for. There are a whole lot of CPSs in the world. Almost every radio manufacturer makes their own CPS to program their radio. There are third-party CPS manufacturers. Chirp is a free open source program. Well, let me back up. I don't know if it's open source, but it is free. There's a free version of software called Chirp that will program many radios, DMR and non-DMR alike. Chirp supports tens, 100 radios. I don't know. I'll put a link in the show notes about the where you can get Chirp from. The other software that you'll see for modifying a DMR radio, since that's what we're talking about, is RT Systems. And RT Systems makes software that also lets you program a number of radios. RT Systems generally costs around $25 for the program, and then if your radio needs a specific cable, there's generally another $25 or $30 cost associated with that cable. And that really depends on the radio. A lot of DMR radios are going to use a micro or mini USB cable and don't need a specific cable for Chirp, so the cost is much less than it's half the price without having to buy a cable. Code plugs aren't hard. We don't want to make them hard. There's some basic steps to follow to get through a code plug, and we want to approach the code plug in blocks. This is my logic for it. And you can do it a couple ways with the blocks. This is generally the way I do it. So the first thing is the non-DMR specific items, and this is your basic info for the radio, boot menu items, whether there's a picture or your call sign shown when the radio boots up. Menu items, what menu items are available, can you do this or that, all this kind of stuff. Programming speed dial keys, programming multifunction buttons, all of those things are done in the CPS software, and general settings for the radio, timeout timers, and so on and so forth. And that does not really vary between CPS software. The functions are there. Some vendors may call it one thing versus another vendor, but it's all the same functions in just about any CPS software. Those functions are things you can program up front, or you can program those after you get the DMR information in. Probably just as well to get the general stuff all done up front and then move on to the DMR functions. DMR specific items, and this is where we get into our blocks. So when I say blocks, there's a base block, and then on top of that we build another thing that requires the base, and then another thing on top of that, and another thing on top of that. And if we follow it in this building block order, you cannot screw up code plugs, because it's fairly straightforward if you do it this way. If you go about it the wrong way, it will make it very much more complicated, and that's what we don't want to do. So our DMR specific items, digital contacts, this is your talk groups. This is worldwide on talk group 31, I believe. Alabama link on 31010, whatever talk groups, whatever network you're going to join with your DMR radio. These are where you put in talk groups. This is also where you put in any private calls in for any of your friends who are also on DMR. Talk group lists. This requires the contacts to be in the radio. The way I do talk group lists is I create one talk group list per DMR digital contact. So if I've put in Alabama Link in the radio, I have a talk group list called Alabama Link. And that talk group list links back to that contact called Alabama Link. Channels are next. Channels require the first two things to be in the radio to properly program. If you don't have digital contacts and talk group lists in the radio, then you can't fully program a specific channel. And a channel in DMR speak is a frequency or frequency pair with, is it digital or analog? And then what, and we're talking digital here, so I'm going to stay on DMR. What talk group this specific channel belongs to, and what talk group list I want to associate with this channel. So in my previous example, I mentioned Alabama Link. My local hotspot here in my house is 433.9, I think. So I would make a simplex setup for digital. I'd set it to 433.9 on transmit and receive. I'd set it to Alabama Link, which I've already created when I created my contact, and I'd set the talk group list for it to the Alabama Link talk group, which I created in the previous steps. I'm going to set the power and then potentially any timeout timers or some of the other functions that are associated specifically with DMR, color code and time slot. And so for a hotspot, you're going to use color code 1 and time slot 2 generally. And you can change those within Pi-Star, for example, or OpenSpot, but those are basically the settings that are going to work almost every time. Zones are the last major piece of setting up a code plug for a DMR radio, and a zone is just a logical collection of channels which contain digital contacts and talk group lists. So for example, I have a hotspot in my house that's on 433.9. I have a hotspot in my truck that's on 433.8. Well, I probably have the same talk groups in the radio already. I have the digital contact in the radio, but I need to create a channel for the hotspot in my house and a channel for the hotspot in my truck. So I might have, let's say, 3 digital contacts in my radio that are on the hotspot frequency for the house. Those are 3 channels, and I have 3 more channels that are on hotspot frequency for my truck. So I'm going to create 2 zones, a hotspot for the house zone and a hotspot in the truck zone. And that's what the use of a zone is for. If you add in analog channels in your DMR HT, then I'd probably add an analog zone. And on the radio I normally use, I have an analog zone. You could also add another zone for DMR repeaters. So if you don't have a hotspot in your truck or your car, you would set it for the local DMR repeater or repeaters. Depends on where you live, how many you have. And that would be its own zone. So if I'm out and about, I don't have a hotspot in my truck, I'm going to change to the local repeater zone, whatever you may call it. So that's all a zone is a collection of channels that are common based on frequency and how they connect. All right. Optionally, the last thing is a scan list if you want to do that, and it is totally optional. It's not required. A scan list is exactly what it sounds like. It lets you put a group of channels together, and the radio will cycle through monitoring each of those. As most HTs don't scan that fast, I don't really think it's that useful. And if I did do it, I would probably only do it for the analog channels and not the digital channels. So that's the basics right there. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump into walking through some CPS software and take a look at that, and I'll be right back. Okay guys, let's take a look at the CPS software. I'm not going to go through every setting in this. This is the CPS for my Baofeng DM1801. Actually, this is the OpenGD77 CPS software because I've loaded that firmware on the radio, but they're all fairly similar. The only real difference between CPS software is how well the user interface is implemented and how well the software works, because some of the CPS is kind of sketchy. Some of it works great. OpenGD77 on a cheap DMR radio works just fabulous. So basic information. This is like radio serial number and stuff. Boot items are what you want the radio to say when it turns on, or change it to an image. The menu are options that you can use or program from the menu of the radio. You can turn that on, you can turn that off, backlight times, keypad lock times, what to display on the specific channels, either the frequency or the channel name, all that kind of stuff. And again, these are all the same in every DMR radio. All right. Number key assign and buttons are speed dials. They're functions to drop either a specific radio or DMR ID or function on a given button. And again, that's pretty much the same in every DMR radio. General settings. This is where we put in the radio name if you want to call it something. Radio ID is your DMR ID. I leave these at the default, the preamble and the duration. These are for alerts for things. Leave the squelch alone. I can set a password in the CPS so you can't edit the config file for this radio without the password. What the channel up and channel down buttons do, how they work. In some radios you can set that to zones up or zone down, or make it run the VFO. That's kind of particular to the radio. Any tones for key up and key down, call timeouts, call alerts, talk around channel, which is not really relevant in DMR. So these are all general functions that are pretty much in every DMR radio. There's nothing really special about any of these. I'm going to skip over privacy and signaling system and text messages because we just don't care about them. And then you get down to contacts. Digital contacts. This is the start of our code plug. This is where the first building block is done. So I've got two digital contacts in here. Sorry about that. I needed a drink. I have two digital contacts in here. I have Alabama Link and Alabama State, or the Alabama statewide talk group rather. And in this dialog box, there's pretty much nothing to it. You give it a name and jump in there and put in the name, the call ID, and that can be an individual call or a group call. Alabama Link is a group call, so that's what I have it set to. I don't have a tone for it, and there's no specific repeater slot for it since it's digital. So there's our digital contacts. Step one, right there. That's got to get done first before anything else happens. You can also, most CPS will let you import comma-separated files, export comma-separated files, so you can manually edit your contacts and so on and so forth in Excel, for example, or Google Sheets online. You can also download the DMR contact database and import that into your radio, depending on how many contacts your radio can hold. The DMR list is approaching 200,000 contacts the last time I saw it, a couple, 3 weeks ago, so most radios are getting close to maxed out on that. So that's our digital contacts. The next thing we have is talk group lists. I have two talk group lists set up in this example code plug file. I have the Alabama State talk group and I have Alabama Link. So I have a talk group that I named Alabama Link. I took the Alabama Link contact and made it a member of the Alabama Link talk group list, and that's the only one that's in it. Same thing for Alabama State. Drop that digital contact into this talk group list, and that's it. Good to go. Now you can get pretty tricky with talk group lists, and that is way beyond the scope of what I want to talk about in this video, but you can actually monitor multiple digital contacts as part of one talk group list. I believe in almost all the radios. Again, I'm not going to get into that in this. That's an advanced configuration topic, and that's a whole nother show. So there's your talk group list. That's step two. Step two is done. Step one is contacts. Step two is talk group lists. The third item that we have to do is channels. So we pull up our channel list. Now I've got some channels already in here, 2 digital channels, 2 analog channels. So if I pull up one to edit, and again, I've already created these. So I told the software that this is a digital channel. This is a hotspot, so it's transmit and receive in simplex. It's not part of a scan list because I'm not using scan lists. I have the power set to low, the squelch to normal. I've named the channel Alabama Link. Timeout timer, I have disabled. Rekey delay, I'm not using that. Admit criteria always. Privacy is off. Privacy is crypto, so that's going to be off. I have a talk group list I need to set. So this is the Alabama Link digital or Alabama Link channel. So I'm going to put the Alabama Link talk group list with this channel, so they're associated. We're on color code 1 and time slot 2, which this software calls repeater slot, and we're using the Alabama Link digital contact. So this is the third step: our digital contact, our talk group list, and now our actual channel. Now, I have one digital frequency in here for Alabama Link and Alabama State. If you were going to have these channels for your home hotspot and one for a mobile hotspot, then you need to name them slightly different, and obviously you're going to make a new channel with a different frequency. And then a couple of analog channels, and this is your basic repeater setup that's in every CPS software that's ever been made since they invented radios. I've told it it's analog, our frequency pair with the offset. Power level, I'm going to do high because this is a repeater and I'm on an HT with this. Change our bandwidth to be full FM analog bandwidth. My transmit tone, and that's it. So that's an analog channel set. And like I said, if I had 2 Alabama links in here, and let's just do that. Let me change the state of Alabama one. You have to click right there on this CPS software. I could go back, and I'm just going to change this for argument's sake, 434.0 and 434.0, and I will call this Alabama State Mobile. Because this is for my truck hotspot. This will become important in a minute. It's going to use the same talk group list and it's going to use the same contact. This channel is not in play unless I'm in the right spot, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So now I have one digital hotspot, or one digital channel set up for a house hotspot and one channel set up for a mobile hotspot. So the last piece is zones. And I have, in this example, I don't have repeaters in it. Or yes, I do. I'm sorry. So I have a digital zone right here. The digital zone has our 2 digital channels in it. I need to make a mobile zone, which I don't have. So we're going to take out the mobile channel that we added that was previously Alabama State. And we're going to leave Alabama Link in there because we're only going to talk on Alabama Link when we're in the house. And then we're going to go to our next zone. That's our analog zone. We're going to leave both of our repeaters in it. And then I want to make a new zone. We'll call this mobile hotspot. And I'm going to put the state of Alabama mobile channel that I made in that zone. Now, I have zones with 1 channel in it. That's really kind of defeating the purpose of a zone, but you get the idea. So now I have, and let's rename that one to QTH hotspot. There we go. So now when I set my radio zone to QTH hotspot, he's only going to listen to the channels that are on 433.9 and in that zone, which at this point is only the Alabama Link channel. If I'm on analog, I'm listening to the 2 local repeaters, either scanning them or just those are the two channels I see when I'm in that zone. And if I'm on mobile hotspot, I see State of Alabama channel, and that's the only one I've got in there right now. But that uses 434, which is the frequency for my mobile hotspot in my truck. So that is the fourth block. Now, there's a little bit of variations in how you tweak some of this stuff, but that is the basics of generating a code plug. And beyond that, the rest of it is optional things, really. It depends on what you want to do with the radio. It depends on how you want to use the radio. Zones give you the ability to break apart groups of connections in some logical fashion. So, for example, if I'm traveling I live in Montgomery County, Alabama. I'm going to be going to the Huntsville Hamfest in August. So I'm going to be traveling from Montgomery through Birmingham to Huntsville. I'll probably have a zone with Birmingham repeaters. I'll have a zone with Huntsville repeaters. So as I drive into those areas, I'll just change zones on the radio, and now instead of listening to Montgomery repeaters, I'm listening to Birmingham repeaters or Huntsville repeaters. Or I can ignore that completely and stay on the truck digital zone, and then my hotspot in the truck and the radio are all I need, and that's going through my cell carrier, and I have digital access to any of the DMR digital talk groups, no matter what network you want to be on, whether it's DMR Mark or Brandmeister or whatever. So that's it. The rest of the functions are individual taste. The actual way that the other functions work varies a little bit from vendor to vendor, but at the end of the day, the four biggies are the same in all CPS software as far as DMR is concerned. But we're not talking about D-Star Fusion or anything else, but DMR, those are the four things. Put in your contacts first, get all those listed, then put in your talk group lists, then put in your channels, and then finally build your zones and however you want to break it apart in your radio, whatever makes sense to you. And as for the general information, you can put that in before you do any of the DMR stuff. You can put that in after you do the DMR stuff. That part does not really matter, except ultimately for everything to work, because you have to have your DMR ID in there. All right, guys, that covers it for today. Just remember, there's only about 4 basic steps to creating a DMR code plug. The digital contacts, the talk group lists, and again, the way I do it is 1 contact per talk group list. Then you're going to add the channels with specific frequencies for your hotspots, either at your house or mobile hotspots, or specific local repeaters that you might use. And then the 4th step is to set everything up in zones as you see fit. That's all we have. I'd appreciate it if everybody would hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. And click the bell so you get notified when I put out a new video. Thanks a lot, guys. 73.